like watching it melt away. My heart's been put on display and put away in many ways. Many times I told myself it was okay, and anger was the price that was paid. While these faded dreams just scream to bring them home, the burden was too heavy, I kept running from the throne. I can't take it any longer, I can taste my spirit hunger. God, please help me get home.
Lord, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I'm not scared, cause you're holding my breath. I only fear that I don't have enough time left to tell the world that there's no time left. Lord, please. Lord, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death.
All right, welcome to hour one of Patriots Lament right here on KFAR. It is local talk radio, 660 on your AM dial, but we are also streaming live on the interwebs. It's KFAR660.com, and you can find us on your smartphone by way of the free TuneIn Radio app. Good morning. Joining us in the studio, as always, from Bighorn Enterprises, Josh Bennett. Good morning, Josh.
Good morning.
All right.
And
it is a beautiful morning out there. Absolutely. This is why people move to Alaska. It's 61 degrees, not a cloud in the sky, just gorgeous green. Makes you forget that in just a few weeks it's going to be all white and 45 below. Perspective, brother.
Until you look across the river and see that building.
Ah, yes.
That's like
that building.
That's kind of reminds you of a dark winter.
It's like when you're on the Millennium Falcon and you're headed toward Alderaan, and all of a sudden you realize that the planet isn't there anymore, and you just see this ugly moon
sucking you in to destroy your life. So we had it was pretty controversial, I guess, issue there with that deal to give the borough employees guns. It was shot down quite hard. And it's too bad. I'm glad that it was shot down, but I thought it was too bad the reasons that they voted against the bill. Because I was glad the bill was gone, but it'd be nice for once if a bill was shut down for the right reasons. Just once. It would be kind of cool. And the whole thing was our constitutional rights and the second-class citizens and all that kind of stuff. So, of course, our position was they are second-class citizens and they don't have the right to carry guns, and they're not protected in the same protections that a individual has in his private capacity. And while it's not a bad thing maybe that they wanted them, their reasonings might have been okay or whatever, but they're incorrect. So if we want to use the Constitution and say that we're constitutionalists and follow by the letter of the law and whatever kind of garbage and your rights and yada yada, then you need to be correct in using that. And it's my position that they were incorrect in using their constitutional Second Amendment rights in doing that. And I'm backed up by the people that wrote the Constitution. I am correct. So let's just get it out there. I am right. They were wrong.
I think that one of the really... you made a good point yesterday when you called into my show that I think that if people were to look at it from a different perspective, get it out of the emotions of the firearm, because it's a very emotional issue. The people who are not just firearms owners, but firearms fanatics, they really get upset when you start talking about any kind of limitations on any gun, anywhere, anytime. And you know what? I understand. On a philosophical level, I don't believe there should be. I think I ought to be able to own a tank if I want.
Absolutely.
All right. I think that the Second Amendment covers the ability of the everyday citizen to be able to defend himself or herself or themselves against a tyrannical government. I can't do that if the government's got tanks and I've got a .22. Okay? They get upset when you talk about any kind of limitations on firearms, and I understand. However, on the other side of the emotional thing, you've got these people who completely come unhinged and start talking about firearms accidents as if somehow guns are just out there exploding and killing, one gun exploded and killed 500 people in a room. No, that's never happened.
Yeah, it was the whole argument over there. There was no philosophical thought or anything.
Exactly.
It was all emotional. Ooh! The one side was blaming Roberts and Michael Dukes of fear-mongering, that there could be an accident, we want these people armed to protect us, and blah, blah, blah. Like, oh, look at those fear-mongers. But that's the same tactic that they used against Michael Dukes and Lance Roberts was, well, look at all the accidental discharges. Come on. I know that there are accidental discharges, and it's terrible that some people had that happen to them or their lives or their families or whatever, but that was a total the same thing, fear-mongering.
Even then, if you just look at the numbers, again, you have to do a little bit of thinking and not just emotional reacting. Most, and I'm talking in the neighborhood of 75 to 85% of accidental discharges occur when there is one other factor involved besides gunpowder. It is called alcohol.
Alcohol, yep.
When you start drinking and handling guns, you're going to have accidents, just like when you're drinking and handling heavy equipment.
Or driving.
I'm not advocating for laws against it. It's just common sense that you shouldn't run with scissors while you've been drinking either. I mean, it's just stupid.
Mm-hmm.
Now, get it out of the emotion and look at any other issue. Is a borough employee 100% guaranteed the right of free speech?
No.
So why not and how not? Give me an example. If a person is over there working in that office.
Right. In his official capacity, when he speaks, then he's speaking for the borough. So if he believes this way and talks officially, then the borough's supposedly backing that up or endorsing that idea. Either way, no matter which side of an issue that he's on, in his official capacity, he's carrying the brute force of the borough behind him.
So in other words,
they don't have it.
If an employee over there were to tell a person coming in, picking up a petition to go and sign for a particular issue, I don't think you should do that.
No.
I don't think that you should be advocating for that position. I don't want to give you that petition booklet. That person is engaging in their, quote, right to free speech. But they could be fired for doing that because they're allowing their personal opinion to interfere with their official capacity. And most people understand that. And they would say, hey, look, there's something wrong. That person over there is mixing politics and allowing their own personal political bent to get in the way of my personal freedom.
Well, and it's like we were teasing about the smoking thing. So how far does it go?
Pursuit of happiness. If I believe you have a pursuit of happiness. If it makes you happy to smoke a cigarette or a pipe or even, a joint. You want to go out and smoke marijuana, I think it is your right to do so. I really do.
Yep.
However, if you do so in a borough building or in a borough vehicle, again,
you're not allowed to.
You're not allowed to. And most people don't have a problem with that because they recognize that when you're in that official vehicle, you are in an official capacity and you have to abide by certain rules.
Right.
Why on earth, if your constitutional right to free speech and if your God-given right to the pursuit of happiness, as outlined in the Declaration of Independence, if those can be curtailed and most people don't have a problem, why not the Second Amendment? If you have chosen to be employed by the government, you are voluntarily surrendering your rights.
Yeah, and I think that it's disingenuous, too, because there is the nitpicking on which rights we think they ought to have and which rights that they should not have. And then it comes back to people's morals, their moral judgments of, well, I don't think people should smoke because it's bad for their health. So I'm going to think that part's okay. But I also believe that people should have the right to keep and bear arms. And, it's just silly. They don't have. It would have been neat if they would have actually had a conversation over there talking about the actual issue. Do these borough employees have the same constitutional guarantees that the private citizen has? Are they the same equal status to the private citizen, or are they private individual, or are they second class, or can they have restrictions put on them because of the capacity that they have? And that we showed last week, I think, maybe you talked about it the week before. You and I hold the correct position constitutionally on that issue. And that issue is that they are second class. They don't have the same rights.
I just want to point out that you made those little air quotes around the constitutionally. People can't see air quotes.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You have to use words like
to you.
So-called.
So-called. Yes. Because we don't really care about the Constitution. You have the right to keep and bear arms before the Constitution was invented, before the Articles of Confederation were invented, before the Declaration of Independence was declared. You have the right to keep and bear arms.
Think about it, again, using logic, using reason. If a piece of paper can give you a right then can't another piece of paper take it away?
Absolutely.
If didn't we just this week, or maybe it was, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago, they were talking about how you now have the right to health care. Do you? Is that a God-given right?
No.
Well, and if they write into a piece of paper, they write a law giving us that right, it's not really a right.
No.
It is, well, it's a perk,
It's a
perhaps.
granted privilege.
Exactly. And you can grant privileges and take away privileges from whomever you want to. Look at the people who have access to the public lands here in the Fairbanks North Star Borough. Look at how many people have the access to the public lands.
Yeah.
And look at how easy it is for certain people to purchase public
I was hoping
lands.
we were going there. We are.
Josh, if you wanted to buy a tract, maybe just a few acres, 5, 6, 10, 40, from the borough, which, I mean, the very fact that we have land that is being owned by a government, that's just ridiculous. But again, that's a philosophical issue, and most people apparently can't understand philosophical issues.
Even though it is a issue that was brought up by Congress and all that stuff in the very beginning.
the very beginning.
The government shall not own land.
Yeah.
All land is supposed to be privatized. All of it is supposed to be owned by the private individuals. Not what we have now. And what we're talking about with that sale with Bernie Carl, what a load of crap. What a load of crap. I mean, basically what you have, we had, in the colonial times, you had the king giving land titles and land grants to Virginia Land Company, Ohio Land Company, the London Land Company, on and on. I mean, there are so many of them. And it was basically the king said, I'm going to grant you this section of land that I own, even though I've never even set foot on that continent, and pay me some penance for it. And basically it's just a reward. That's all it is. It's a reward to his oligarchy paleo buddies. No different here. We have the king at the borough over here granting
King Luke the First.
a land title, a land grant, a charter. Basically, it's what it is. It's the same thing. It's a charter colony to Bernie Carl, the Bernie Carl Land Trust, or Bernie Carl Land Company.
Otherwise known as Chena Hot Springs Resort.
Right. For way undervalued. The property is way undervalued. And we don't need to come up and say, well, he did give $75,000 to Luke Hopkins. It was maybe $7,500. He gave a little bit of money to his campaign.
And whether it was $75 or $75 million
or $77,
it doesn't really matter. It's whoring. and yet whether you're dealing with an expensive lady escort or you're dealing with a cheap $10 whore, either way, it's the same issue. If somebody is willing to trade favors for money, that person's a whore. Is that too blunt?
No. It just boggles my mind that we have a land oligarchy right here in the borough. 200 and some odd years after the Declaration of Independence. Oh my gosh, that's awesome. And people don't even see it. I mean, that's the part that's most disturbing, is people don't even see it.
Well, and here's the thing. Is that
all the arguments are going around in circles instead of pointing out the obvious. I mean, there's, wow, that's too cheap, or what? No, how about the fact that you're granting a land grant just like the king did?
Does anybody else have access to make a bid on that land? Does
that's
anyone
the whole
else?
thing.
Does anyone now? Look, I would not have a problem with it at all if Bernie Carl had bid in a process with everybody else, and his $390 per acre was the highest bid. Did you hear that number?
I think it's $180 an acre.
Well, has it come down from that?
Wait, it's like 160, 180.
Holy
It's something. But yeah, I wouldn't mind if it went out to general bid
I
and
might,
he bid it for $1.
I might even be able to come up with $390 to go buy an acre, even if it's land that I'll never get to. It's so that it's land that I can leave to somebody. Because you know what? I have less than an acre in downtown Fairbanks. And you know what? I've got 7 children. If we're going to divide that 1 acre into 7
plots
pieces, that's not very much land, I wouldn't have a problem with it if his low ball bid was the winning, and nobody else wanted it and nobody else bid on it.
Yep.
But the fact that it is a closed process, being negotiated behind closed doors, in which basically he's coming up with this price, and they're coming up with a price which I think is undervalued to begin with, And it's not being open to the public, and it's not giving anybody else an opportunity to come out there and bid on the land. That's when I have a problem
Just
with.
an insider.
Not with the land ending up in private hands. I want the land in private hands. I really do. I just want it to be a competitive process,
an open process.
by which other people have an opportunity to do it. Otherwise, it is exactly what you said. It is a land grant. It is a charter, and it's a favor. It's payback, perhaps.
Well, there's just so many. I mean, when you're in public office, you're supposed to be above reproach, right? People shouldn't even be able to look at something you're doing and imagine that you have false intentions, bad intentions. And we can look at this one, and it's pretty easy to come up with a lot of ideas that may or may not be true.
Well, and that's the thing, is that it's not even a matter, you don't even have to think about it. Just by looking at it, most people would say that doesn't sound right.
Yeah. And, perhaps he should want to have it go to public auction, and because there might be a lot of people that wouldn't, you may not get anyone to bid on it, and he may be able to bid it for $1 and actually get it. Who knows?
But we don't know.
No.
We don't know. Right now, it's being negotiated, and it's being settled behind closed doors, and most of the people in this borough apparently don't care. Most of the people in this borough apparently are just fine with taking whatever scraps the king gives them.
Mm-hmm. There you go. As long as I get my scraps. Yeah,
Well,
it's wrong.
Use your words, Josh. Use your words.
It's wrong. This shouldn't happen that way. They shouldn't own the land anyways, but it should not. That process should not be. That is actually, follow me on this, would probably fall under the correct term of fascism.
Where a private company has teamed up with government to get favors and exclusive access.
Wow. Now we're calling Luke the Hopkins a fascist. Luke Mussolinio Hopkins. Well, Luke, he'd be proud of you. He'd be super proud of you, Luke. Good job.
Well, you know what? And here's the thing. Again, there's an awful lot of emotion that's wrapped around the word fascism because people associate it with the Nazi death camps. Mm-hmm. If you take it just from the basis of the word, fascisti, the bundles of sticks,
Yeah.
and you go back, where does that come from? It comes from Rome.
Yeah.
This is all the Roman disease. This is something that goes back for thousands of years.
Who is that guy? What was his name? Said something like, "There's nothing new under the sun."
Some old dude. I think he's dead a long time ago. He was like a king or something.
Yeah, we don't like to listen to those people.
Well, it's ancient wisdom
All the
literature.
dead people are so dumb anyways.
Wait.
Otherwise, why would they be dead?
Was he a dead white guy, or is he like a dead Jew or something?
He was a dead brown guy.
Huh? Solomon?
Well,
yeah.
So we definitely can't listen to him. Oh, but he was Jewish,
Yes.
so we can listen to him.
Well, it depends, because there are a lot of people who don't like to listen to anything Jewish, especially the anti-Zionists who like to call into this radio station.
Oh, such silliness.
You know, I'm taking my sharp stick here and poking as many bears as I possibly can this one, just to see if anybody will wake up.
Well, with these two issues that we're talking about, if people would get, like you said, was a really good point, get out of the emotion and think logically. And if you want to argue constitutionally, think about it. Study it a little bit and then hammer people. I mean, that's the whole basis of the show, is to help people to think a little bit and learn a little bit. We don't know everything by any means. It's a stretch of the imagination. I like when we get callers in here that come up with something that I've never heard of or never knew and learn things. I love that, especially historical things. That's what we're trying to ask people to do. Learn about what you're talking about. Get out of the emotional side of it, and then learn to argue your point, stand on your point, and win. Because that's ultimately the goal, is to win. No one likes to be a loser. You want to be a wiener.
An Anthony Weiner?
No.
All right.
A winner.
Oh.
No, but I'm jesting, but I'm serious about that. We are in an intellectual battle for our rights and our liberties. It's an intellectual battle. It's not an armed conflict. It's an intellectual battle. Arm yourself with truth and knowledge and a little bit of studying, and you can do it. And then when you talk to your friends, you talk to your mortal enemies, you talk to people that you don't like, whatever, win the day, win your argument. And then that person if they're intellectually honest with themselves at all, will listen to you and say, maybe they're correct. Maybe you'll encourage them to want to beat you in your argument, to go and study, and they'll maybe come around to your point, or maybe they'll come with a point you never thought of.
Yeah,
But
and you know, I
get
think
out of the emotion.
that right there, Josh, is what I've enjoyed most about this program, is that there's been a lot of thinking involved, and there have been points, instead of just coming to the point of saying, I win the argument, we're coming to that point of asking the question of, have you ever considered X, Y, or Z? And why do you believe what you believe? Can you defend what you believe? I mean, you think about all these different aspects. There are an awful lot of people who call themselves Christian, who think of themselves as religious, who cling to beliefs without doing any kind of thought behind it at all.
Yep. There's a lot of...
That's not what Scripture calls us to.
No.
What is it? Isaiah said, come, let us reason together.
Let us reason together. That means use your brain.
Peter said, always be prepared to give an answer. For what?
For the truth inside you.
The whole point is to give an answer for what you believe. And if you can't do that, if you're just holding on to something in blind faith, then you're no better off than these global warming idiots.
Exactly.
You claim, there's global warming. Dude, we had the coldest winter in 25 years. You're going to say that 1 week of hot weather and that's global warming?
And I looked into that back to the 30s and the 20s here. We had like 5 years where it was in the 50s during December, January, February. 50 above zero. We haven't been doing that. As long as I've lived here, which isn't forever. It's only 11 years, but it's a little bit. I'm almost an Alaskan. We've been here for 15
Yeah, see,
years.
I've been here for 19 years.
Well, you're an
people still
Alaskan.
no, they still consider me a Chichaco. I think in order to truly become a sourdough, I think there are certain, you have to kill a bear. I haven't done that yet. You've done that. Okay, you have to go up and I think you have to pee in the Yukon.
Oh, I've done that.
I've done that, and then I think you also have to marry an Alaska Native to really be an Alaskan. And I'm not doing that because
Well, how's that
I'm
work?
already happily married. So
Well, that sucks. I guess we're not going to be Alaskans.
I guess we'll always be chocolates. But you know what? Maybe someday our kids will be able to join.
Actually be Alaskans.
Right.
I was going to say what you're saying about Christians knowing what they believe, and the same applies to the so-called, if you call yourself a constitutionalist that's listening to the show, then you should be able to defend that Constitution. Like, get it, do it, right? Don't just listen to the emotional stuff and listen to someone else telling you what your right is or what the Constitution says or anything like that. Know it for a fact for yourself. And don't just read the document itself. Read the Federalist Papers. Read the Anti-Federalist Papers, more so. Read the writings that were going back and forth to those guys. Read the debates. The debates or the Continental Congress are all online. Read everything Patrick Henry said. Then go back before them and read where those guys got their ideas of common law and natural rights and private property. Read about Jean Locke. Read De La Boete. Read Algernon Sidney. Read these guys, understand, then have that in your back pocket.
But now you're asking
To
people
defend
to do
yourself.
things that they're not willing to do for anything at all.
yeah.
I mean, you think about, again, how many Christians, people that call themselves Christians, actually read the Bible. You got to ask yourself, how many people that you know put any time toward reading anything? I mean, most people don't even have time, don't even put in the time to read the newspaper, or anything online. They're so, we've been so conditioned.
Most people don't even take the time to read our blog. That is pathetic. Or how about anarchists? You anarchists out there, don't just have a piddly, crappy excuse that, well, I hate the state. Why? Back it up, baby. Have a reason. Show why you don't believe in a state government. Show why you don't believe in a state, period. And then have a reason to show, have a way to show why you think a better society would be without one. Because that's really hard to do. Have a reason for when people say, yeah, well, what about when there's no police or whatever? Study. Show it. Be able to show where your rights come from, why liberty means something to you, and why it actually, where you get this historical background for it, and be able to show different instances of the state destroying the people, which is really easy to do.
What will we do with the drunken sailor? What will we do
Sorry, I thought I'd mix it up a little bit with the bumper music today. All right, we're coming up on the Fox
do a little
News.
jig.
Fox News coming up here at the bottom of the hour. You've got it on Patriots Lament on KFAR. We will go to the phones when we come back from the Fox News. Those of you on hold, stay with us. We just had to get a little bit off our chest this morning. 458-TALK is the number. KFAR660.com is the website, and you can find us on your smartphone by way of the free TuneIn radio app. So check that out and keep it here on local talk radio KFAR.
Fox News is here on KFAR.
Fox News Radio, I'm Lillian Wu. More deliberations this afternoon for the George Zimmerman jury after a lunch break. The question facing the 6 women.
Whether George Zimmerman committed a crime when the neighborhood watch captain fatally shot 17-year-old Trayvon Martin, or whether he acted in self-defense.
Fox's Jonathan Sari in Sanford, Florida.
Outside the courthouse, a group of protesters continues to grow. While most of these protesters are calling for the jury to convict George Zimmerman, there is a smaller group out here rallying for his acquittal. At times, both sides confront each other in spirited debate, but so far the protests have remained peaceful.
And a British governmental agency looking into the fire yesterday on board an empty Boeing 787 at London's Heathrow says there's no evidence it was caused by faulty batteries. Those are what grounded Dreamliners at the start of this year. Fox News, we report, you decide.
The first choice when you want breaking news. KFAR 660 AM.
Lord is the Spirit. Where the Spirit of the Lord is now, there is liberty. And the Spirit lives inside of me. Where the Spirit of the Lord is now, there is liberty. There is liberty. There is liberty. For freedom you set me free. And yes, I am free indeed. You rewrote my name, unshackled my shame. You opened my eyes to see. I am.
All right, welcome back to the show. This is Patriots Lament right here on KFAR, local talk radio. Let's go to the phones. All right, they didn't hold. How about you? Good morning. How about you? Who's this?
This is Winston.
Winston, thanks for calling in. What's on your mind today?
You're speaking of sourdoughs a while ago.
Yes, sir.
There's 2 kinds of sourdough. One of them is a person that eats this yeasty concoction that they call sourdough. That's a true sourdough. And the other one is a person that is sour on Alaska and they ain't got enough dough to eat.
I like sourdough pancakes. Does that count?
Oh yeah, that counts. That counts.
I've got a batch of sourdough at home that I believe. Let me think. 1870 is when it was started. How many
Right.
years? How many years is that?
My goodness, you're serious.
I'm serious.
143 years?
It has been kept alive for 143 years, and the person I got it from, the mother batch died, and so I was able to rejuvenate with some of the daughter batch that he had given me. So this batch has been alive for 143 years. I make pancakes quite often, not every single week, but most often on Sunday mornings.
Why does that scare me for some reason? Has it ever grown, and got up and walked around the house or anything?
No, but it did vote in the last election.
Oh, it did?
In 3 different states, yes.
Well, as long as it did that.
Winston, as long as we got you on the line here, you've been here in the Fairbanks area for more than a couple of years.
Right.
When you look at what's going on over at the Borough building and you see the way in which, just in general, they seem to think that they can make up laws about anything they want to, does it concern you at all to have Borough employees carrying guns?
as individuals, no. As borough employees, which now I have to state, I'm outside the borough, so that's really nothing to me.
Yeah, I thought you were.
But anyway, like I say, as individuals, that don't bother me. The thing about it is the government is going to take and seize as much power and position as they can, and until you push them back. And it's just where the pushback limit comes to is how weak or how strong the people are.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I really struck me as odd. It seemed like we were helping the government get more power, because there's just no way you can get around it. When you're an employee of the government and you get to carry a gun, you feel more power. That's just the way it is. Because first you have the backing of the state, which is supreme power, supposedly, and then you get to pack a gun. I mean, there's a reason why Obama has armed every three-letter organization in the United States government, because it gives them a feeling of power, purpose, and loyalty to the state.
It's not just a feeling of power. I mean,
They
yes,
have the power.
Yeah, I mean, but at that point, I mean, you look at the National Park Service throwing a 71-year-old man in the mud,
Yep.
boarding his boat in the middle of the Yukon River, just like some kind of a pirate ship, and
it was an open boat.
exactly.
Yep.
They could see all the way to the bottom of it.
Yep.
This is the kind of thing that should never have happened, and the kind of thing I think that's going to continue to happen more and more and more, because most people, again, Winston, how do you feel when somebody else comes up to you and you can see their gun, and you don't know that person? I mean,
That don't bother me.
Right.
He don't pull his, I won't pull mine.
There you go.
It's-
You know, that's a good point right there. If there is an intimidation factor.
Yeah.
If I see people that have a gun on their side or whatever, it doesn't bother me. If I see a government official with a gun, I get
That
bothered.
bothers you.
Yeah, absolutely does. Because unfortunately, people get shot by government officials, and whether they pull that thing, whatever, there's an intimidation factor. If you have a tax assessor on your property, you're pretty much going to do whatever he tells you to do. Hey, I want to assess your bathroom. Okay, come on in. And then the whole thing was, well, they have to get permission from at least one person on the property that lives on the property. What if you decided, no, I don't give you permission? So now does he get retribution on you by saying, doesn't think I should be carrying a gun? Well, your property just went up in value. There's nothing to stop that. You could protest it, but that's ridiculous. Or what if you have an 18-year-old child considered adult that lives at your home still, and that borough employee comes in there with a gun and asks that person, son or daughter, hey, do you mind if I carry a gun here? What are they going to say? They're going to go, oh, yeah.
That has actually already happened. I heard a report a couple months ago of where a borough tax assessor had come onto somebody's property, and it was a 10-year-old child that they asked for permission to come on and take a look at the stuff.
Yeah, if I remember, the ordinance didn't say how old or whether it had to be an adult. I think it just said, either way, though, an 18-year-old's an adult, supposedly, according to the law. So you get that factor in there, and of course they're going to be intimidated to say, yes, come on in, because I'm an ossifer. Because we train the kids from the time they're 4 years old to love the government and love the state and do whatever they tell you to do. Except for my kids. They would say, beat it, Buster. You can carry yours, but I'm carrying mine.
Show me your court-issued warrant.
That's right.
Thanks, Winston, for the phone call.
Oh, did you have anything else, Winston? Or?
No, that's it.
All right, man. Thanks for calling.
Yeah, bye.
458-TALK is the
Love that.
number. Good morning. All right, they didn't hold. You know, Josh,
That was the hotline, wasn't it?
It was a hotline, so somebody was trying to reach us, maybe to correct us on
Oh, I hope so.
some issue. I love it when people call to correct us, because sometimes, again, in the heat of battle, in the sense of here while we're talking, I think of things that come up. I mean, like the other day, somebody was calling in and asking for, on Joe Nava's Shooter's Corner, was asking for a reference for a state bit of statute. So I looked it up and gave what I thought was the best answer for what I could, just based on what I could see on the screen. Turns out I might have been wrong. Look, correct me. If we've got the correct stuff out there, we'll put it out there. I'm not trying to pull the wool over anybody's eyes. I'm not trying to mislead anyone, and I know you're not either. If we say something here that needs to be corrected, I'm a lover of truth.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Hit us. You know, that's one thing I always appreciated about you was, that's the tongue in the back of the throat language. Appreciate about you because you have always, if something that you weren't sure about or whatever, either looked it up or challenged us after the show or whatever and say, hey, you know, where did you see that? I want to know about it, back that up or whatever, and that's good. And it's way more fun to get challenged than it is just to have people call in and say, yeah,
Ditto, man.
ditto head, bang.
Whatever you say.
Even though we appreciate people agreeing with us, it's much more fun.
I would rather have somebody who doesn't agree with us and who can appreciate our position.
And actually have a conversation about it.
Exactly.
That's fun. That doesn't happen a lot, but that's fun when you can actually have a back and forth conversation and no name calling, whatever. Yeah, let's do this.
458 Talk is the number. Good morning, caller. Who's this?
This is Jim and Kenai. How you doing?
Hey, Jim and Kenai. Good.
I've called in to challenge you.
Yes.
I've called. I want the borough employees armed. I want them armed, and as a matter of fact, in order to make explicit the gun in the room, I want them to have to walk around always with their weapon in their hand, pointed at people. I think that would better represent the true nature of one of the borough employees.
There you go. Yeah.
And since we're passing laws about what they get to do, I think they should all be forced to also wear tutus and clown wigs.
Jim, you see, now you're going to lose your credibility when you start making them feel that way. Jim,
I bet his cheek hurts, though, from his tongue pushing it.
Yeah, it's very possible. When you look at the basic issue of what government does, it is legalized force, it is basically theft, and it is violence. And a lot of people don't like to hear us say that. There are people who have been so brainwashed into thinking that somehow the government is necessary, that even somehow God has ordained government. And I hear people take Scripture out of context and turn it around and try to make it sound like God ordains godless government. Have you heard those kind of arguments?
Oh, yeah. It's funny, though, that then these are the same people who also say that our godless government is ordained by God to dispose other godless governments, which are also ordained by God. Anyway, it gets confusing.
Oh, it does. That's such a good point. So if all governments are ordained by God, who are we to go dispose of another government?
Well, but it's not us.
Oh, it's God?
It's our government.
Oh. Yeah.
Doesn't that create cognitive dissonance in people's head, though, that somehow they start wrapping their mind around, wait a second, I am going out I am supporting going out and murdering people on a large scale so that they might be able to have life.
Yeah. Tom Woods made a good point. He was talking about the people who, he was talking about people who are very, very ostentatious opponents of slavery today, and that that's a costless position today. Where would these people have been similarly opponents to slavery in the 1850s when it was a very unpopular position to have? They're unwilling to take other unpopular positions that have social costs associated with it.
That are relevant today.
And this comes up because of various reasons that are political in nature. But anyway, I just wanted to be an advocate for clown wigs and tutus and the borough employees actually carrying guns, because it's funny that somebody would say that their borough employees are second-class citizens. So a second-class citizen is one who gets to live off of the compulsed labor of his neighbor. That's an interesting definition.
Wow. Bingo. No joke. So who's actually the second-class individual? The people that are forced into indentured servitude, or the ones living off of it?
Yeah. Okay, well, have fun, guys.
Thanks, Jim. Appreciate the call. 458 Talk is the number. Good morning, caller. Who's this?
That guy.
Good morning, it's Al.
Al, go ahead. What's on your... Hey, Al.
Yeah.
Have you fished in the Chena River lately?
No, I don't fish in the Chena River.
Okay.
Can't keep anything.
I know, huh? What's up? What's
It's
the
for
po-
floating only.
What's the point? Unless you're under the influence.
You know, the one thing that, I just got to throw this out. How come we have to buy King Salmon stamps if we can't even keep the stupid things?
I am working on that right now.
I figured you were. In fact, you know what? A couple days ago, I was thinking about that, and I thought, I need to talk to Al, because I bet he's already got something going on about that.
Yeah, I'd like to, if nothing else, have a bill introduced just to get the populace in an uproar of, why we're spending $10 for a stamp that we can't even retain a fish yet for.
Yeah, that stamp, I've tried, is horrible on the barbecue.
Well, that was created. That was created 20 years ago, approximately. For the conservation and the development and the protection of habitat, and look where it's gotten us.
Oh, wow.
We have fewer fish, right?
Yeah.
Good point.
So I'd like to see that repealed.
Al, why did you call today?
Why did I call?
Yeah, sorry to take
maybe
you
I
down that.
misunderstood you the other day, or you were doing it tongue-in-cheek, but it seemed like you were in favor of mob rule on this referendum for oil taxes.
Are you talking to me or to
I'm
Josh?
talking to Steve, yeah.
Okay. When you say I'm in favor of mob rule, what did I say that made you think that?
Unless I didn't understand it right, you were in favor of this referendum going forward.
Which is that the one to repeal
the
the
one
tax?
that would repeal the
SB 21,
the tax break that was given out. I honestly, Al, am in favor of the people of Alaska rising up and throwing off their government. I'm in favor of people doing whatever it takes to bring this government down, short of violence, and I mean short of actual hurting people violence. I think anytime you can get people involved in a political process that takes away the power of the politician, I like it.
Al, I think I know where you're going with this. Can I say something real quick?
All right.
So, this goes back to the very beginning of the show, being fundamentally correct about your position and thinking about your position. So, we have people that claim to be Republican form of government folks. They want limited government, they want to have this representative government. And at the same time, they're backing a petition to have the mob decide what the rule is going to be, when in fact, what they clamor for, what they are for, is a representative government. So if you're going to be for representative government, then whatever your representatives ultimately decide, you should follow that, because that is what you voted for. That's why you're involved in the process. The whole process doesn't mean that, well, I don't like it, now I'm going to have a referendum and the majority rule. Because it's not about majority rule, it's about representative government. So if we want to be true to the form, then you have to be consistent all the way around.
That was one of the points, and then to further up what Steve just said, if you want the government to control or fall apart or have less power for the politicians, if this SB 21, like they claim it'll do, will take the money out of the coffers, which will collapse the government.
Yes. That's exactly. And here's what I really think is going to happen.
I want a $10 billion giveaway.
No, Al. Seriously, here's what I think is going to happen. I think that this is going to go to a vote. I think they're going to get enough signatures. I'm not personally going to vote on it. I don't vote anymore.
This is great.
However, I think it will go to a vote, and I think that the people will vote to repeal the tax change, which would mean that in the last 7 years we will have had 4 major rewrites of tax law. That turns us into an unstable economy in terms of the oil industry. That will give them the excuse they need to pull out of Alaska. I think that would be the best thing that could possibly happen to us. I think that if we got off the teat, if we got off this, I mean, you think about how many people are okay with the fact that the state government gets, how much is it? $10,000, $11,000 per man, woman, and child? They get $10,000, at least $10,000 per man, woman, and child to spend however they want to.
From the feds?
No, from the oil companies.
Oh, I see.
And you and I, we get $1,000. And we're okay with the fact that the state government gets $10,000 per man, woman, and child as long as we get our $1,000. You know what? If that went away, all of a sudden, people would be questioning: do we really need to provide free lunches to kids in Cotsville? Wait. Do we really need to be building a bridge that's going to benefit 34 people on an island because they're too cheap to want to have to buy their own boat?
You know, it's a good point as far as the taxing issue. And Al's a businessman, and I think he would agree with this point, is that when you have an unstable tax policy, if you're in business, you want to know 3, 4, 5, 10 years down the road, where am I sitting with this government this far down so I can plan ahead? In a business, you have to be able to plan ahead. And if you don't know what your costs are going to be tomorrow, much less 3, 4, 5, 6 years, there's no way for you to plan. And you will ultimately either pack up and go, or you might make the wrong business decision and go broke.
Yeah. To change the subject.
Absolutely.
And to, you did give me a statute the other day over to Airwaves, Joe Nava there, so I went and looked that statute up. And that was pertaining to municipalities not restricting firearms.
Yes.
And so it was very interesting. It's probably another bad law made by our legislatures, because it says that municipalities may not restrict the use or carrying of firearms. So the question is, and you guys have been throwing this around a lot, is, you know, you assume that borough employees are the typical employer-employee relationship. I can make the argument or the debate that people that work for the borough are paid public servants, and they're not an employee. There's a difference, because the borough's not a business.
They aren't, but technically, yeah, they are and they aren't. I mean, if we paid them directly, but we don't get to directly pay them, we get our funds stolen, and then they divvy out. I mean, because
that's my point.
I don't get to decide how much the guy that plants the flowers makes, and I don't get to decide how many times he waters the flowers. I don't get to decide when they mow the lawn at the borough. I don't get to decide what the color of the building is. I don't get to decide anything.
On the other
they
hand,
don't actually work for them.
On the other hand, because of the tight economy and the way things are, I had to decide not to plant flowers this year. So my tax money is going to pay somebody else to plant flowers for the public when I can't afford to plant flowers for myself.
So they're just paid public servants is what these people are.
I don't like the term servant.
I don't think they serve.
Well, they serve, you know, they do serve. They serve for, you know, whatever they're hired for.
But when you serve, though, I don't think that's the correct term, because when you serve, you basically are doing something with no benefit towards yourself, at least monetarily. When you get a job, you're not really a servant. You're like saying, I'm trading my time for your cash.
Well, you missed my first part. They're paid public servants.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I did miss that.
And so, you know, since they're not, there's no employer-employee relationship, because they're only working for what money they can oust out of our taxes, out of our properties, and we're willing to still pay for it. You know, the borough doesn't have a business license. They don't pay federal income taxes.
Just because they exempt themselves from every law they make.
So they're not an employer.
Maybe the correct way to go about this would be for a borough employee to go to court and challenge it and say,
well,
this
that
is
would
my...
be, if the borough employees wanted to truly push the issue of being able to carry, that would be, you know, behoove them to, you know, take it to court and say, you know, the statute here says that, you know, the municipalities may not restrict.
Mm-hmm.
You know, instead of, and the point is with the legislature is that they really wanted that to not have a loophole, is it should have said shall instead of may.
Right.
Because that's a very big difference in a court of law.
That's a big trick they like to play.
Right.
To give themselves a loophole.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I don't think I ever heard that point necessarily be brought up. Maybe I did, but I don't think that was necessarily what was argued during the debate, that the state statute does not allow municipalities to restrict firearms, so maybe that should have been the way they went around it.
Well, you know, it was on the Michael Duke show, and I talked to him a little bit about it, was that, and then brought up those same points that, you know, he brought up the argument that, you know, these people volunteer as to choose this job or this lifestyle, their income, and so as a business owner, we can restrict, you know, our policy. The administration can make a policy that says that all our employees won't be carrying.
Now,
I say the statute's a little better clear on there, and it says, you know, the municipality shall or may not restrict. It doesn't say anything about businesses or people or anything. It just says the municipality may not restrict.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. I don't know. I don't like to think about them being able to carry just in their official capacity. I think they should be able to own an RPG when they go home, but not as an official borough employee. I mean, it was just like the other day I was driving by, I saw someone out watering the flowers off an airport, and my son said, "Hey, how'd you like to see him packing a 45?" He's out watering the flowers. And that's being kind of facetious, but at the same time, there's a point to that. I don't know.
Well, the other point is if you think of a normal business operation, they have private property, so they have some rights to their own property.
Yeah.
Again, the borough doesn't have any private property.
Right, it's public, which means it's not anybody's.
It belongs to everyone, and therefore it belongs
So we
to
go
everyone.
back to the statute, and it says, you know, the municipality may not restrict.
Well, I guess, like you said, probably the proper way to go about it, if an employee of the borough government decides that is an infringement, then he needs to file suit.
Have a wonderful day.
You too, Al. Thanks, man.
Appreciate that. You know, I just wanted to point out that in the last couple of minutes here, Al mentioned Problem Corner, and he mentioned the Joe Nava Shooter's Corner, and he mentioned the Michael Duke Show. So obviously, Al listens to our station quite a bit.
Al's a smart dude, too.
458-TALK is the number. Good morning, caller. Who's this?
Good morning. This is Mark.
Mark, what's on your mind?
Yeah, I really like the previous caller. He wish he knew the statute. I don't offhand either, but I think that the borough is a government entity in itself. You know, tongue-in-cheek, almost like the university. However, let me give you an example here. If you give somebody a little bit of power, and it could be anybody, even a volunteer firefighter, okay? And then you call them up, and you're an educated person, you've been around for a while, say a couple decades, and you tell them, you know, hey, I'm just letting you know I'm going to burn a little campfire on my property so I can evade the burn ban, let's say. Well, the guy, you know, gets kind of arrogant with me. Nothing personal against him, but he was just uneducated to the statutes. And so my point here I'm trying to make is that if you give somebody a little bit of power or a little position of authority, how easy it is for them to run away with it. Like, let's just say a road commissioner. It's very easy for them to accept Title 17 standards and just kind of run away with them. And once you point out to them that they're not legally binding and they're actually illegal under the state statutes, they really back off. And I walked right in and got the copy and talked to the borough engineers down there, and they said I was absolutely correct. And I'm not tooting my horn, I'm just saying that when somebody gets a little money in their pocket or they have a little bit of authority, they might run away with it.
Yeah.
So
that's a good point.
Excellent point. 458-TALK is the number.
I was going to read I found the statute for you if you're still listening. It's Alaska Statute 29.35.145A. Provides the authority to regulate firearms is reserved to the state. Wait a minute. How is that possible? I thought the Second Amendment said shall not infringe. So how can they regulate? We got a conundrum in the first sentence of this statute. So this statute's crap. Why even read it? It's not even a law, right? Didn't the Supreme say that if it's unconstitutional? It's not a law? Well, I'll read the whole thing when we get back.
All right, those of you on hold to stay with us, we've got more to come.
The hour's over?
The hour is over. You've got it on Local Talk Radio. Let's get something a little less cheery.
There we go.
Yeah. You take a mortal man.
Oh, yeah. Put him in control.
And put him in control. More Patriots Lament after the Fox News.
Talk radio for the interior. 660 AM. KFAR. Fairbanks. Do you want to share something you heard on one of our shows with someone who missed the program? Become a member of the 660 Club, and you can listen online to our archives. KFAR660.com.
If you love wealth better than liberty, the tranquility of servitude better than the animating contest of freedom, go from us in peace. We ask not your counsels or your arms. Crouch down and lick the hands which feed you. May your chains set lightly upon you, and may posterity forget that you were our countrymen. Samuel Adams.
The time is near at hand, which must determine whether Americans are to be free men or slaves. George Washington.
And what country can preserve its liberties if its rulers are not warned from time to time that this people preserve the spirit of resistance? Let them take arms. The tree of liberty must be refreshed from time to time with the blood of patriots and tyrants. Thomas Jefferson.
Posterity, you will never know how much it cost the present generation to preserve your freedom. I hope you will make good use of it. If you do not, I shall repent in heaven that ever I took half the pains to preserve it. John Adams.
I sincerely believe that banking establishments are more dangerous than standing armies, and that the principle of spending money to be paid by posterity under the name of funding is but swindling futurity on a large scale. Thomas Jefferson.
Government is instituted to protect property, this being the end of government. That alone is a just government, which impartially secures to every man whatever is his own. That is not a just government, nor is property secure under it, where arbitrary restrictions, exceptions, and monopolies deny to part of its citizens the free use of their own faculties. James Madison.
It would be an absurdity for jurors to be required to accept the judge's view of the law against their own opinion, judgment, and conscience. John Adams.
Whenever the legislators endeavored to take away and destroy the property of the people, or to reduce them to slavery under arbitrary power, they put themselves into a state of war with the people, who are thereupon absolved from any further obedience, and are left to the common refuge which God hath provided for all men against force and violence. John Locke.
It is in vain, sir, to extenuate the matter. Gentlemen may cry, peace, peace, but there is no peace. The war has actually begun. The next gale that sweeps from the north will bring to our ears the clash of resounding arms. Our brethren are already in the field. Why stand we here, idle? What is it that gentlemen wish? What would they have? Is life so dear, or peace so sweet, as to be purchased at the price of chains and slavery? Forbid it, Almighty God. I know not what course others may take, but for me, give me liberty, or give me death. Patrick Henry.
My people perish for the lack of knowledge. God.
Some people you can never please. You might as well just let them be. They mock everything not their own from their imagination.
Welcome to Patriots Lament right here on KFAR. Hour 2 is upon us. Josh Bennett from Bighorn Enterprises joining us in the studio. Also joining us this hour, we've got Aaron Bennett. Josh, when you first suggested that we use Super Chick as a theme song, I was like, what? Super Chick? Where's that? And then I looked at the album Rock What You Got, and there's that song. Oh, okay, all right, I get your point, though.
That's a good song. Fits perfectly.
Well, just the lyrics alone, the idea that, you know what, you may think I'm crazy.
That's a big fat no.
But I'm not going to bow down. You know, and it ties in perfectly, too, with what Patrick Henry said.
Yep.
You know, go ahead and bow down and lick that and feed you.
No, that was Adams.
I was thinking about when you were talking about a businessman wanting to be able to look 3 or 4 years down the road and knowing what to expect from his government. And that's a great argument for a flat tax.
Well, yeah, okay. I don't like any tax. Can we get to the no tax part? How do we get to that?
A flat zero tax.
Well, I just been hearing a lot of arguments lately for a flat tax, especially with the whole IRS scandal thing going on. People have it built into their mind that we can make taxes equal, that there can be some equality in the tax structure in the first place. And it doesn't matter how you structure it, it can never be equal, because there's always taxpayers and tax recipients. So any way that you wash it, it can never be equal.
That was one of the things I always wondered about back when I was in the Army a long time ago, is that how was it that I still had to pay federal income tax when I was getting federal income tax for my pay?
That's just a compliance issue right there. But Steve, did you really think I was going to go somewhere other than where I just went with it?
No, not really. I think that you're one of those people that is fairly consistent with what you say and what you believe, Aaron. And that's one of the things that we were talking about in the last hour in terms of consistency. It's hard to be consistent when you spend the first, 12 years of education being told over and over and over again?
I didn't get that privilege.
I know, that's just...
Thank God.
Why it's a little easier for people like you who didn't go through the public school system to be consistent with your beliefs instead of being trained knee-jerk to just accept what you're told.
Always beating up on the public school.
I don't know what you guys were talking about, because I was driving, obviously. I actually just got here from Prudhoe. The station doesn't come in very good in my truck when it's hammered down to the floor. But if I let off the gas, I get great reception. I don't know what it is, but you guys were talking about something that was making me think about the way people view democratic republics versus the way they would view like a dictatorship. And people seem to put dictatorships in the same category that they put monarchies. And I think that's a myth and a fallacy that needs to be stepped on a little bit. Dictators fit into the same category as democratic republics. Dictators like Mao, Hitler, Stalin, so on and so forth. They spoke vehemently against monarchies. They hated them. They knew they got their power. Their power was derived from popular support from the people. They held elections. They held rallies. They were politicians. Correct and proper politicians. They had no hereditary titles. Dictators today, I mean, look at Saddam Hussein. Didn't he hold elections?
He was reelected every single time.
Isn't that amazing? But I don't understand. I mean, I guess I do understand, because
so is George Bush.
The only similarity between a monarchy and a dictator is the fact that there's a singular ruler. But even Napoleon was a singular ruler, but he was in one of the biggest democratic republics of all time. They're totally different. Dictators in the 20th century are a product of democratic republicanism.
Right. And doesn't that a lot of that
and
happen?
Democratic process.
Exactly. That's where my mind is wrapping around this now, finally, to just some little bit of degree, because you see, back in the days of kings, even the kings were subject to the law. And now the democratically controlled, the process, the people. We can make whatever law we want to. We can go out there and get signatures and have a referendum to change the law
and exempt themselves.
And Stalin used the Democratic, Republican, or at least the mob rule process to get rid of what? A monarchy. Hitler did the same thing. So on, and so did Mao. So on and so forth. The dynasties fell to the Democratic, Republican type process.
I've been learning a little Chinese. Do you know what Mao means? It's the word for cat. Mao.
I guess I hear a lot of rhetoric about Obama is trying to be our dictator. Obama's trying to be our dictator, and people fundamentally reject the idea of a monarchy. If we started talking about how we needed to have a king, people would straight up slap you because everybody knows that's ridiculous. It's been the idea of having a hereditary title has been so delegitimized in the world, not just in America, that any and everyone sees it as ridiculous. And I think that the real goal that Josh and I've tried to achieve on this show is a lot of people lately have been saying, "Oh, you guys just say the same thing all the time, say the same thing all the time." But without delegitimizing democratic republics, they're never going to change. I mean, 200 years ago, no one would argue the divine right of a king. And today, people would slap you in the face for saying it.
Right, because of directly because of the Declaration of Independence.
Directly because opinion, ideas. Right, you were talking about how we got, that's how I started thinking of all this. You were talking about how we got the Declaration, how people need to look at where they got those ideas from, read the Federalist Papers, and you started talking about De La Botte, so on and so forth, and where those ideas came from. That's what got me on this tangent. But speaking of that, I wanted to read something from one of my personal heroes, which is Gustav Molinari.
How did you learn how to read if you didn't go to public school?
I don't have a clue, Josh. I don't know how I learned how to do construction sites either and do all the math and rip off my employees and all that stuff.
That is a skill.
But this gentleman wrote this essay for a newspaper in 1849, and he was a Frenchman, which is interesting. So is De La Botte. And here's what he wrote.
Bastiat.
If there is one well-established truth in political economy, it is this: that in all cases, for all economies to serve, for all commodities to serve to provide for the tangible and intangible needs of the consumer, it is in the consumer's best interest that labor and trade remain free, because the freedom of labor and of trade have as their necessary and permanent result the maximum reduction of price. And this, that the interests of the consumer of any commodity whatsoever should always prevail over the interests of the producer. Now, in pursuing these principles, one arrives at this rigorous conclusion, that the production of security should, in the interest of the consumers of this intangible commodity, remain subject to the law of free competition. Hence it follows that no government should have the right to prevent another government from going into competition with it, or to require consumers of security to come exclusively to it for this commodity. Nevertheless, I must admit that up until the present, one reconciled before this rigorous implication of the principle of free competition, one economist who has done as much as anyone to extend the application of the principle of liberty, Charles Dunoyer, thinks that the functions of government will never be able to fall into the dominion of private security. Now here it is a citation of clear and obvious exception to the principle of free competition. This exception is all the more remarkable for being unique. Undoubtedly, one can find economists who establish more numerous exceptions to this principle. In other words, if you go to any economist or political philosophist, they all agree.
Philosophist?
Move on. Philosopher. We got it. They agree what?
Political philosopher. They agree on two fundamental things. One of the things that they all agree on is that monopolies are bad. Right? From the point of the consumer, a monopoly is bad. Mm-hmm. For the obvious reasons, quality will go down and price will go up. But all those same economists and political philosophers agree that when it comes to the production of security, that only a monopoly of the state can fulfill this requirement. And now if you challenge anybody, which I just recently did, challenged a professor, he immediately took the road that Hans Hop predicts that he would take, and he starts to question the first thesis, that maybe monopolies aren't all bad. They never consider challenging the second one, that maybe a monopoly on security is bad. Now, I suggest that if you want to totally grasp this, a really good book to get your mind around that is the Myth of National Defense. They actually dedicated the book to the Frenchman that I just quoted. It's a great book. Anyway, that's all I had. You guys got me excited.
That was good.
I like that. I appreciate that. A lot of the myth that we have that you were talking about wanting to destroy comes from the public psyche, comes from even going back to the yellow journalism, the turn of the last century, even going back to the late 1890s. A lot of this stuff was being drummed up to gin up public support for the extermination of the natives. To say, look, we need to go out there and put these Indians in their place because they're killing the white folk. And they painted this picture of the western United States as some kind of a wild place that needed taming, that needed to have a strong government to go out there and put these people in their place.
Well, it's always the moral majority, Steve. The state has its roots in things that are good in concept. States wouldn't exist if the Protestant uprisings had never happened. The interesting thing about that is they're always ideologically motivated, and ideological motivated things tend to be the most brutal. You look at the reign of Cromwell, one of the most brutal times in English history, because all of the things that they did were ideologically motivated. You look at the French Revolution, all ideological. That brings me to something interesting I was thinking about on the ride home. People tend to view democratic republics as being nonviolent. And since the turn of the 20th century, when the whole world went democratic republic, there's been more death at the hands of government than all private murders since the beginning of time, just since the turn of the 20th century, committed by democratic republics. Democratic republics are the most brutal form of government the world's ever seen.
Well, the very fact that you're calling people to come out to vote is that you're calling people to come out and force violence on their neighbor.
Absolutely, but I'm talking about the actual brute violence of murdering each other. The best example I can give, obviously, would be our American Civil War, which would be two democracies fighting each other, which technically democracies don't fight each other. It was the most brutal war the world had ever known until maybe World War I came along. The world had never seen anything like it. With the because it's the first time that the first war of its kind, other than the Protestant uprisings, that was 100% ideologically motivated. There's no clear-cut goal. There's no territory they're trying to take over. There's like a monarchy. Their wars were over titles and land. This kind of ideological war really has no end.
And it gets into the head of the soldier, too, because if you look at, historically speaking, how hard it was to get soldiers to actually pull the trigger and kill somebody else. You'd have, you go back into the Middle Ages even. So a lot of the great battles consisted of the armies sitting on hills across from each other for days or weeks on end.
Because the crowning achievement in a general's career would be to have a bloodless battle that was won by brilliant maneuver instead.
Well, even the kings would hire private armies to fight for them, and these private armies wouldn't actually kill each other because they all knew each other. So they'd be like, hey, yeah, King so-and-so hired me and my gang. Like, cool, King so-and-so hired me. Guess we're going to war. Nice. They would literally meet in battle and fight each other, and maybe someone might die by accident. But they literally would not kill each other. It's a historical fact. Yeah. They literally wouldn't kill each other because there was no reason to do that for a stupid king.
Exactly, because they didn't have that ideological commitment. I like where Aaron is going with this, because you see, if you look at, again, the American Civil War and how committed the guys in the Confederacy were to the issue of states' rights, and how committed the folks in the Union were to, you're going to do what we say, you can't break up this Union. The average citizen, they were signing up and willing to go out there and kill their brother.
Here's the interesting thing, though, is that because we believe that democratic republics are nonviolent in nature, and especially nonviolent to each other, which is an absolute myth, it's where the Republican right and the Republican base gets its idea that we need to spread democracy, because in theory, if we could democratize the whole world, we would have world peace.
And yet, in order to achieve that peace, you need to kill several hundred million people in the process.
Of course, any ideologically motivated war, the only way you can be sure you won is to kill everybody.
Because somebody might have a different idea than you do.
Exactly.
I wanted
to make one more point before we ran off to something else. Crap. I lost it. Go ahead.
Well, I wasn't necessarily going to go somewhere else. I was just going to show the ridiculousness of democracy, democratic process, and being able to make up law, which we always talk about, being able to make up law, and how stupid that is. And I'm going to use Alaska Statute 29.31.145A. Provides the authority to regulate firearms is reserved to the state. Okay. How is that possible when the Second Amendment to the Constitution says shall not infringe? Now, if you all are thinking, and you got your caps on, you're going, because the amendments to the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, were only for the federal government. Outside of that, states could regulate. Well, that's no longer true, because we have, fast forward or rewind to the 14th Amendment, which was ratified and said that everyone has these rights collectively in the states. No one can infringe on these rights. And that was to give that to basically all national citizens have the same rights as all state citizens, yada, yada, yada. So that effectively destroyed the states' rights argument, except for the fact that once the 14th Amendment was ratified, the southern states weren't allowed to vote on the ratification because they were no longer part of the Union. They effectively did secede. And then the northern states also wouldn't allow them to vote or have a vote on it anyways. So it was never properly ratified according to the Constitution of the United States. So the 14th Amendment is bunk, which means, and if states shall regulate, that has to be bunk because the Bill of Rights says shall not infringe.
Again,
so I mean,
a lot of this goes back to the fact that we're making up law, that we are coming back to this issue of somehow we can make the laws that we want it to be. Well, if I make a law today, what's going to prevent you from making a different law tomorrow to change it back?
Absolutely nothing. You know, American government was a super soft government before the question of secession finally got answered, because every state took it for granted that they could secede from the Union, and that kept the centralized government a very soft core government. And then after the American Civil War, when it was no longer a question whether they could or couldn't, it was obvious that they couldn't secede. The federal government became exponentially more totalitarian.
We're having a conundrum here. But we have a serious problem here with this statute. Does the state have reserve the right to regulate firearms, or is the Second Amendment supreme to that?
Well, and if you look at the whole point of the reason why they passed that particular regulation is because you had municipalities coming in and making even tougher laws than the states had,
Right.
than the state of Alaska had. And that's why they passed that to say, look, Anchorage, you can't have a stricter law than the rest of the state of Alaska. And
But
that's
where does the state get off saying that it reserves the right to regulate firearms? A strict constitutionalist would go about and say, well, the Second Amendment, that's just for the federal government. But you can't have that because the 14th Amendment said that all the amendments...
I don't think there's a strict constitutionalist in the United States of America, John.
I can be one.
Joe Miller.
I can be one.
Whatever you're smoking, you need to pass it over here.
I can be one if it benefits me or benefits my argument. But so with the 14th Amendment, though, that encompasses all the amendments to the states and gets rid of the states' rights. So which is correct? And if that's true, then this statute, the state shall regulate firearms, is incorrect. And it should be null and void because the state can't regulate firearms because the Second Amendment of the Constitution says that it shall not infringe. So here, it's a conundrum. Where are these things? How does it pan out? Where does it fit? You have contradictory statements in 3 documents contradicting each other, so which one is actually correct?
They wouldn't contradict at all if security was private.
Right, that was my main point. The government itself is contradicting itself for power, and yet which one do you follow? For us people, just like with the taxes, if you don't know what your tax bill is going to be 5 years from now, how do you regulate your business? So how do you how do you regulate your own life when you don't even know what the law is? Because it contradicts itself.
And you can't know what the law is from day to day. Even it's like fishing for salmon on the Chena River. On Thursday morning, I went out there to fish. As of Friday morning, if I had done that same thing, I would have been breaking the law.
No, if you kept the fish.
If I kept the fish, exactly.
So this. Just to let everyone know what the actual statute says. The authority to regulate firearms is reserved to the state and except as specifically provided by the statute, a municipality may not enact or enforce an ordinance regulating the possession, ownership, sale, transfer, use, carrying, transportation, licensing, taxation, or registration of firearms. So, based on that, you say, how can they restrict the borough employees? Municipalities may, however, adopt ordinances that, according to 29.35.145E2, prohibit the possession of firearms in the restricted access area of municipal government buildings. Restricted access area is the area beyond a secure point which visitors are screened. It does not include the common areas of ingress or egress open to the general public. So, they can restrict the borough employees from carrying.
My head is swimming.
Yeah, that's the whole point of it. None of it makes sense because it contradicts itself in its own document.
458 Talk is the number if you'd like to get in on the conversation.
What happens when you have fools making laws?
You get the government you deserve?
No, I don't deserve it.
458 Talk is the number if you'd like to be a part of the program. This is Patriots Lament on Local Talk Radio, KFAR.
Keep it here for Fox News, next on KFAR.
Fox News Radio, I'm Lillian Wu. The 6 women on the George Zimmerman jury are deciding between murder, manslaughter, or self-defense in the shooting of Trayvon Martin.
Deliberations began yesterday afternoon. Outside the court, things are peaceful. Demonstrations of support for both Martin and Zimmerman wax and wane in the hot Florida sun. It's 88 degrees here. They debate with each other, though they remain civil as deputies keep a watchful eye.
Fox Radio's Evan Brown in Sanford, Florida. And Texas passes one of the toughest abortion measures in the nation.
House Bill 2 is finally passed. Congratulations, Senator.
The bill bans most abortions after 20 weeks of pregnancy. Governor Rick Perry says he'll sign it into law. Opponents say it'll close all but 5 abortion clinics in Texas. 7 states have passed similar bills.
Fox Radio's Steve Knight. The bill also requires all abortions take place in surgical centers. Fox News. We report, you decide.
Some call it conservatism gone crazy. Some call it hate radio. We call it what it is. Local Talk Radio. Be a part of the discussion on 660 AM.
Welcome back to Patriots Lament right here on KFAR. I'm Steve Floyd, the man with the face made for radio. Basically just the trained chimpanzee in here to push the buttons and make sure that the message from the Bennett brothers gets out. Joining us in the studio, we've got Aaron Bennett today. Good morning, Aaron.
Good morning.
And from Bighorn Enterprises, we have Josh Bennett. Good morning, Josh.
Good morning. Aaron's extra smart today, if you haven't noticed, because he's wearing headphones that once were on David Giesel's head.
Oh, is that?
So we got double smartness over here.
You're going to invoke the name of Dave Giesel. So we got to get that man to call into the show again. It's been a long...
He's having too much fun. He needs to call in so we can depress him.
Yeah. We need to get that cow back into the corral. That's what we need to do. He fled the tax farm.
Farmer, look! Go get him!
We got this KP. During the break, Josh, you were saying something about why people aren't up in arms about the NSA spying program. Mm-hmm. Why people aren't burning down a building somewhere. And for folks who have read 1984, the whole point of George Orwell's novel is that most of the people welcome Big Brother. That issue of Big Brother is watching you was not an entirely negative thing. The people enjoyed being watched. The people wanted Big Brother to watch them and to watch over them and to keep them safe.
Well, it's just, it bugs me, and I don't want people to burn down buildings. It just boggles my mind that in a place like Brazil, those people have no sense of liberty, no historical background in it, nothing, right? Yet you raise their public transit 10 cents, and they freaking have 2 million people storm the streets and turn over cars and march and protest, and millions of people protesting over a 10-cent public transit raise. Come on. We find out that the United States government is surveilling everything you do, and there's not even an uproar. There's not even an outcry of anything. It's just like, oh, darn those guys. And then the other half is, oh, that's good. I don't have anything to hide, so what do I care? We should be freaking out. Literally freaking out about it. Because they totally broke the law. They totally destroyed the Bill of Rights. They totally destroyed whatever semblance of Constitution they thought they had. And yet there's not even a peep. And the only thing I can think of, besides the cognitive dissonance that we were talking about, is that it's got to be the fact, because we have been so well trained by our government handlers that we can fix it with the next election. That's got to be it. Or these other people don't have that feeling that they can fix it with the next election in Brazil or wherever. I mean, the world is in upheaval right now, and the U.S. is just sitting back going, what's on the TV tonight there? What football game we got going on? And we're totally so stupid. Totally not even understanding what's going on in the whole world. And we're living in la-la land. The world is burning. We're playing the fiddle. We're going to burn too. Burn. Burn. Yeah.
458 Talk is the number. We go to the phones. Good morning, caller. Who's this?
This is Brian.
Brian, what's on your mind?
You know, I was thinking about you guys the other day. Were you talking about how people are not really reacting to this? Mm-hmm. NSA revelation and all the other things that are coming about. And I remembered a song from a band called Devo. And I can't remember the name of the song, but one of the lines was, what you have is freedom of choice. And what you want is freedom from choice. People are, there's a large percentage of the people, I don't think it matters what population you look at, they're intellectually lazy. I saw that a lot in the academic world. There's a lot of people who just don't want to put out any effort, mentally or otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
And don't want to think about this. If they understood it and they looked into it, they're afraid of becoming upset. They're afraid of taking responsibility and holding people accountable. And I honestly believe that there's a large chunk of the people who do not want choice, because that requires intellectual exercise. It requires a little bit of commitment that you actually stop and think. And people have gotten to the point in this country where it's so good, things are so easy that they're lazy, not just physically but intellectually.
No, I think you hit it right on the head, and I think part of it is because what you just said, because we have it so good, and people don't want to think about, could it be not good? They don't even let their mind go down that road. They just want to sit back and say, I don't care what happens here, as long as I'm taken care of, and I don't have to think about it. I got a big TV, I can barbecue, that's good for me.
They've never really been deprived of their freedom in this country. People in this country for so many generations have had every freedom there is. And a lot of people define freedom differently now than they used to. A lot of people say, well, I can get in my car and go where I want. I can talk to anybody on the phone. I can go buy whatever I want. I can go work wherever I want. And, to a certain extent, the definition of freedom has changed because of the advent of technology. And I really think, I've been thinking about the same thing since the Snowden thing came out.
Yeah.
And I think the people who are worried about it are the ones that need to worry about it. Because the people who are ignorant and lazy intellectually, they're not going to raise a finger. They're not going to speak out regardless. So it's the people whose hair is standing up on the back of their neck that are the ones that need to worry about this sort of stuff, because the government has to, appropriate its resources where it can to be the most effective, and they're going to focus on the troublemakers.
I don't know if I totally agree that it's because of technology, because the acceptance of this has been before technology went to where it's at. I can still remember when it was like the most amazing thing in the world that my oldest brother had a cell phone. We'd all oogle at it. And I remember when my parents got a Commodore 64, it was the most amazing computer on the planet because you could play games on it, and we would all stand around and wait for our turn to play it. So I'd have to disagree with you a little bit that it has to do with technology. I think it has more to do with the fact that we're all lazy by nature to an extent. We all covet, and this particular system that we have allows everybody to covet their neighbor's stuff. And more than that, it allows, under a monarchy, for instance, we're all able to view a singular person with suspicion, and we accept what is what we would be suspicious of now. We go ahead and accept because tomorrow we could be in that person's position, and then you have the added legitimacy of the fact that we helped put him there. I think the combination of those things and the fact that we can legislate on each other and covet each other's stuff is way more to do with it than technology. Technology
has allowed us to be lazy, though.
Sure, technology has allowed us to be lazy, but I would have to say that since the beginning of time, man's been lazy.
I can play Angry Birds on my phone.
You're exactly right, Aaron. Since the beginning of time, man has been lazy, which is why you've only had think about this. You've only had a certain amount of people at any given generation that have been able to read. Most people, up until the 20th century, actually probably up until the 18th century, the 1700s, most people were illiterate. They had to accept what someone else told them.
It's also why it took us 5,000 years to get out of the Malthusian trap.
Exactly.
Well, the fact that people did become educated can directly be shown to the revolutions that happened in the world.
It led to it. Now look what's happening now. We are becoming illiterate again. We ask people to read. They have a hard time with it. People are having a hard time even reading what's on the web. They're getting their information in little bits and pieces from radio, from TV. Yes, from the internet to a certain degree, but people can't read.
Well, they need to get more information from this show.
What they need to do is follow up and get those books that you talk about.
You know what the caller, what was your name again? Brian. One of the things he said that was spot on there, too, is that freedom has been redefined. What we think is our freedom has totally been redefined. It's been redefined by the state. Basically, look, you're happy enough, you're free. Keep telling yourself you're free, you're free. And yet, the point, I guess, part of the point of our show is we want to remind people of what freedom really is, what liberty really is way more than what these goons are telling us it is. I mean, we're trying to get people to remember that and to engulf this into their body and soul, that when a government official accosts you for any reason, he is violating you. When an officer pulls you over for whatever reason, he's violating your right to travel.
Right, freedom's not the ability to go down and vote your will on your neighbor. And security isn't somebody taking half of what you have with the promise to protect the other half, which is exactly what our government is. That's the two branches of our government.
Yeah.
I still like this analogy that the modern times between the government media complex and the technology, in people's minds anyway, not in the traditional sense, have really changed the way people think about their freedom. And I think a lot of what's going on right now with people that I end up talking to is rationalization. They go, well, I can still do this and I can still do that.
Right.
And I go back and I tell them, hey, why is it necessary for the TSA to shake down a little 3-year-old kid or a 96-year-old woman?
Or a 30-year-old man, exactly.
Right, but if you go all the way back to the city of Athens, they were doing the same kind of things. I mean, almost identical. They started setting up things to spy on their own citizens. They're setting up roadblocks. It's the exact same kind of thing. You can literally go back to that long ago and see the same things happening.
Wait, wasn't Athens a democracy?
No, yes.
Well, I think part of what the caller's point is that what we have basically is a slow boil of the frog.
Well, sure. I mean, but all I'm trying to... I 100% agree with the caller. All I'm trying to say is it's not a phenomenon that's unique to today. What did Goethe say? And he was born how long ago? None are more enslaved than those that falsely think that they're free.
Yeah.
I mean, he would agree with you right now. Your premise is exactly the same, but he was from a long time ago.
I think it would change in this country if people started losing their physical ability to be free.
Yeah.
You know, if you actually took people and were throwing them in whatever, jails, camps, prisons, or whatever, and that became widespread, and everybody either knew somebody that was in one of these things there themselves.
Did that happen in Germany?
Germany was considered the land of scholars and poets. In fact, most of the people that Josh and I subscribe to in our readings come from either Austria or Germany. And from that era, they actually, Mises, he fled Germany because of obvious reasons. He was Jewish.
Yeah. But I mean, that's the whole point, is that the people that were in Germany, that were watching these people getting rounded up.
Considered the smartest people in the world at the time. The most artistic, the smartest,
and
the
they
most
still
educated.
thought they were free while they were watching their neighbors getting hauled off to prison camps.
Of course. And
well, I'm hoping that what we have is that we'll be able to learn from that, though. I mean, there are people today, there's still a lot of people today, and more so every day, I think, that look back at Germany and see what happened there and can
right, but the thing you don't read in the history books is all the resistance to the Nazi regime that was going on, and all the intellectuals that were resisting it. And
that's why
we don't give that enough credit. A lot of intellectual people fled and went to Switzerland, to America. Some went to France, unfortunately.
Yeah, they spoke out.
They did speak out, and the reason that it was ineffectual and Hitler was able to do the things that he did, the Kaiser could have never done those things. Never, ever, ever could have done those things. But Hitler was able to do those things because he had the popular consent.
He was voted in.
So, not to be a pessimist, but I don't think that people going to jail or people being called off or stripped of anything is going to change anything, because that happens all the time in America.
I think it depends on who's the president. I mean, if there's a total lockdown and
like
Obama,
in Boston,
yeah, and Obama was president, I can see a scenario where people would freak out and revolt. There's going to be
right, but what about if McCain was president and it happened? I mean,
I don't know. I think now if McCain was, people would really freak out because that guy is a freak show.
Right, but people are already talking about who our next president's going to be and getting all excited and who's Sarah Palin going to endorse and this and that. And that's you guys like to talk a lot about the way a Christian should view these things, but part of the problem is Christians won't do anything as long as their guy's in, because for them it has nothing. They don't recognize that force and theft are anti-Christian. They're so fundamentally against anything that Jesus taught. Anything. And yet they still, I think it's so appropriate that Hans Hop called his book Democracy, the God That Failed, because anybody that thinks they're a Christian and is also a statist lies to themselves. And I don't believe that liberty is only for Christian people. And I don't think, well, I've studied up a lot on our founders. A heck of a lot of them weren't Christians. Most of them were spiritual in the fact that they believed, right, they were deists. And I don't believe that somebody has to be a Christian to embody liberty in any way, shape, or form. But I do know for a fact from looking at history that Christians are the ones that enabled the state and created the state. And I think it's going to be hard to get them to let go of it because they are scared to let go of it.
Well, they've been indoctrinated that it is correct to think that way.
Well, look at Luther. How many people's religion comes from, or Orthodox that they go to, comes from Luther. And if you read anything about Luther at all, he was a mass murderer. And he used the princes and the states to murder on a scale that's mind-boggling. Just mind-numbing how many people he murdered, and he would sanction the murdering. Not only sanction it, he would cry for it. And he was the reason people were being murdered. And that mentality is still in your Christians in the Republican right today, because they're scared to let go of their moral majority because they have no faith.
Because people might be bad, Aaron.
Because they don't believe in God. You can't have faith and hold on to the apparatus of force because you want to force goodness because you don't have faith.
For
right?
goodness sake.
Right?
Absolutely. Come on.
Well, the biggest thing that bothers me is that, like, Sam Vanderwall, who's a regular listener to the show, always says that you and I are the most unique.
Still does?
He says well, I think so, but he says you and I are the rarest of the rare.
You out there, Sam?
Because we're Christian anarchists.
Right.
But I don't see how you can be a Christian statist. How can that possibly be?
It's it's that they're diabolically opposed to each other.
Right. Absolutely. So I think I have to challenge Sam's assertion that we're the rarest of the rare.
No, that's not necessarily true. We are the rare because
I think
most Christians are statists.
I think that most people who consider themselves Christians are statists.
But what I'm trying to tell you is that it's not possible.
Oh, you're saying...
See, now you're saying that they're not really Christians.
Making a moral judgment.
Like Hans Hop would say, nothing can be red all over and green all over at the same time. Or, in other words, nothing can be pitch black and pure white at the same time.
What about red-green show? He's red and
Doesn't
green.
that make brown? Yeah, all right. We got the phone calls finally now. 458-TALK is the number. Good morning, caller. Who's this?
This is Randy.
Randy! Welcome back to the program.
Now, here's a Christian status.
I told Dave that you didn't call anymore, and he was sad.
I've been trying to cut down on my calling to radio talk shows because I've got so much other things to do. But
it's like a drug addiction.
I can't resist, yeah. I was just backing up just a little bit. You were talking about private security and monopoly security. Of course, we have private security companies like Pinkerton or something, but just going to the subject of armed forces, national armed forces, and going back to the subject of the Civil War, I think both sides pretty much had kind of basically a monopoly command. Robert E. Lee was the head over on the Confederate side, and later Ulysses S. Grant, Abraham Lincoln, I guess the ultimate head, Davis, the ultimate head on each side, and but I remember in the Battle of Gettysburg, the reconnaissance for Robert E. Lee was kind of like Jeb Stuart and his cavalry but there became a division there, or disjointedness, because Jeb Stuart, as I recall reading, went on a big, long, circuitous raid around
Yes,
the area,
that's correct.
and didn't bring back useful, the important reconnaissance that Lee desperately needed.
Because he wasn't on a reconnaissance mission. He was derailing trains. He was on a raid rather than a reconnaissance mission. And since he was embroiled in that, he wasn't able to be the eyes and ears for Robert E. Lee.
Yeah, well, anyway, my question is, if the South had just private security, private army, no coordination, no tax-supported army, would they have been able to hold out as long as they did? I mean, they lost anyway, but they went for 4 bloody years.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, sure.
Randy, where did they get all the material to fight that war?
You mean the gunpowder, or
the material?
Well, I get did England help them a little bit? Anyway, I guess they they produced goods, cotton.
Where did they get the people?
Their own people.
Yeah.
Okay. So what exactly did the government contribute other than a mass debt because they started printing money?
Well, they contributed the monopoly coordination so they could allocate scarce resources where they needed to.
Actually, that is a good point, Randy. Let's back up to another war that happened previous to that one, and that would be called the Revolutionary War. Now, we can see and make a very good case there that the Revolutionary War was won by private security and would have been lost by Continental Army. The Continental Army, much to much people's chagrin, sucked. The commander-in-chief of the Continental Army, George Washington, sucked as a general. He was perhaps the worst general of the Revolutionary War. He consistently and constantly lost every battle that he had. Okay, except for when he went across the river there and killed the Hessians or whatever, the Hessians, during Christmas. That was a brilliant move, but that wasn't necessarily his idea.
Nor was it strategic.
Right. Every other thing that he did, especially strategically minded, he utterly failed because he wanted to incorporate the state into the army. He demanded obedience. He demanded we're going to be just like all the armies of the world. We're going to have centralized power, centralized government, army. The army that won the war, and if you just read a couple of history books, you will see the army that won were the private militia men. The farmer who grabbed his knapsack, grabbed a piece of bread, grabbed an apple, grabbed his rifle, took off running, shot 2 or 3 shots, and ran back to his house as fast as he could go.
And what did your centralized army get?
They got their
starvation.
Deprivation. The centralized army had to go and seize private property from the own people that they were supposedly fighting for, just to subsist, while the private army, which were just volunteers you just had volunteer generals, basically. I mean, literally, you had Nathaniel Greene and those boys. They were private citizen armies.
Morgan's Riflemen, come on.
And they kicked
the Green Mountain Boys.
Give me something.
You know who these guys sound like to me?
Flag, by the way.
These people that you're describing who are just been basically living at home and going out volunteering and taking a couple of pot shots at this invading army. Man, it sounds so much like what's happening in Iraq.
You know what the best part is?
In Afghanistan.
Before George Washington, the 2 years before George Washington came onto the scene as the commander-in-chief, the British had made zero headway because there was no head for them to take down. Once George Washington took over, then they actually had a chance to win.
Yep, they had a centralized enemy to attack. And Steve, excellent point about Iraq. Afghanistan, what centralized government is backing them up? None. And they're taking on the greatest military ever known to man.
It's why we are still fighting there 10 years in. I mean, isn't this what happened in Afghanistan with the Soviets led to the collapse of the Soviet Union?
The private person fighting for his liberty is the most lethal person in the world, bar none.
If you have competition in security, will the quality go up and the price go down? $400 billion spent leading up to 9/11 that same year when $50 gun in the cockpit that the state regulated was not legal could have saved us $400 billion.
Oh, snap.
Oh, wow.
But this is
It's a joke.
Yeah.
The myth of national defense. Read it, Randy.
Private security rocks the party. Private army rocks the party. And it's because it's not an army.
It's an
the private militias were not an army. They were men that got together and went, doo, doo, doo.
You paid homage.
And the British laughed at them because they're like, look at them, they always run. And they used that to their advantage. They'd run and the British would chase them. Oh, we got them now. Then they'd come up to another volley.
Right into an ambush.
And then they would go home,
Yeah,
milk their
Concord
cows.
and Lexington, they got their butts handed to them. Using
Bam.
that tactic right there. Come on.
The whole southern, when the British tried to take over the South, destroyed by individuals fighting them. Morgan. Bang.
All right, guys, we're at the end of the show. Action point for today.
Read Conceived in Liberty, Book 4, and find out what really happened with private individual armies.
Conceived in Liberty. This has been Patriots Lament.
Yeah.
Something that is not only produced, but is dreamed up, and all the content coming from Bighorn Enterprises. Josh.
Randy
and
got
Aaron
us
Bennett.
going. Thanks, Randy.
Thanks, Randy, for the phone call. We will see you again next week, 9 a.m. on Saturday morning. Up next is Health Talk right here on KFAR Local Talk Radio.
KFAR Fairbanks, 660 AM. Online at KFAR 6.